Welcome back. Good to have you in class again today. I look forward to this time. Even this kind of indirect, I still look forward to it. And I would look forward to your chat sessions and stuff at the end of the week. That gives me the feedback as to how we're doing, what we're covering, all that. And while I can't make the adaptations quite as easily this way, I do try to pay attention to feedback and incorporate it in future, if not in this course. Through the feedback, though, I will give you advice on how to proceed if you have any doubts, any questions that way. So do make sure you get your feedback in every week. That's an important part of an Indirect class like this. Now today we're going to start on how to evangelize. And you say, great, I took this class, I could learn how to evangelize the world. Here it is, half a semester. We haven't even talked about that yet. We've all talked about how to go, how to live, how to survive, how to communicate, that kind of thing. And that's okay, because you see you need all that kind of stuff before you're going to be successful at the specifics. And so now that we've talked about intercultural communication, we've talked about how to live, we've talked about the missionary call, we've talked about tools, we've talked about staying spiritually and intellectually viable, and all of those things. Now we're at the point where we're going to start talking about how to apply those in real life situations and how to decide what's going to be the best way to evangelize in the specific area with the specific people in the type of culture that you find yourself. Now, we focus this on world evangelism, on missionary work, but at the same time, most of this stuff applies very well to every local church situation as well. You're going to find that as you go from one area to the country to another, people are different. You're going to find that values change. The focus of a culture and of a people in a particular area change. And that happens on the micro level and it happens on the macro level. You know, even within a community, you talk to a farm family and you talk to somebody that lives in town. You talk to maybe an insurance salesman or a real estate salesman or a car salesman. And then you talk to somebody that maybe works in a factory or a construction type job or something of that nature. So while we get those changes on the micro level and they are smaller, we can get them on a significant level as we go across our country. And I've already mentioned you'll find people in California different than you'll find people in, say, southern Illinois. You'll find people in New York City, and that megapolis over on the East Coast goes from Washington up through New York, basically one solid city now. And people that live in that area have different values. They have things that they appreciate. They have things that they think about. They tend to be what we would call more liberal socially. I realize liberal and conservative are slippery terms, but I think you'll understand where I'm going with that. We get into the Midwest, though, what's called the Bible Belt still, or we don't use that term quite as much as we used to. We do find a lot more focus on religion and on value and family values and things like that. So there are those changes as we go through the country here as well. Now, as soon as we jump across a border, going to Mexico, for example, even with all the tourism, even with all the commerce, even with all of their immigration up here, many of whom work here for a while and go back, while we do find that mixing of cultures, we find that difference of cultures as well. And then the farther we get from our own national border, generally speaking, the greater the cultural difference we're going to encounter. And that means that we're going to have to adapt. We're going to have to learn. And then we're going to have to construct a viable method that's going to work there. I say repeatedly, if there had been one method of evangelism that will work everywhere, in every place, in every time, God would have put it in the Bible. And since He didn't put it in the Bible, that's because there isn't one. So if somebody comes along selling you, oh, this great plan is what you need to make your church grow, maybe. Probably not. There may be things in that plan that'll work for you, but there'll probably be a lot of things that don't. Because you see, that guy thinks they're great because they work for him where he was. And where he was, with his personality and with the values of the community that he worked, you're not going to replicate that 100%. And if you don't replicate him and his cultural values, you will not replicate the results that he has gotten either. And so keep that in mind. And that's the reason I don't focus too much on the details of specific programs. I work more on styles of evangelism that we can then find the functional and operational modality that'll work in our area to use that general basic type of evangelism. Now, today, you'll notice in your syllabus, I have a reference to a movie, and that movie is homework. I'm giving you that assignment as homework this week. Now, you can find this movie on YouTube. I think you can rent it on Amazon Prime. You could anyhow at one time. I looked and it was there. You can buy it still, surprisingly. It's old. It's cheesy. It's goofy. It's got everything wrong with it you can imagine. It's ancient. It was made way back in the days when the earth was crusting over, back when I was young. It's everything a movie shouldn't be, I suppose. But at the same time, it's great. And I think you'll actually enjoy it. I've used it in quite a few classes, and I have yet to have anyone say, I thought that was a waste of time. And, they all say, it's goofy, but it's good. It's got a good message. And so for your homework today, I want you to go back to your dorm room or your apartment or wherever you're living, and I want you to get on your computer, and I want you to look up the Gospel Blimp. Now, you guys probably know what blimps are. I know they're old technology, but they have the Goodyear blimp at all the sporting events and things like that. So you've seen a blimp, I would imagine, or the pictures that come from it, or anyhow. So this story is about the Gospel Blimp, and it talks about everything that's wrong with the church and the way we do things. It talks about everything that's wrong with missions and the way we do missions. And at the same time, it gives you the answer to how to do it right. And that's the beauty of this movie. You'll like it, I think. If not, let me know. If I have a class where I think more than one or two people would ever say, I don't like it, it's worthless, then I'll probably stop using it. But that hasn't happened yet. And I think you'll actually laugh at it. You'll have a good time with it. You'll say, man, look how crude things were back then when they made movies. You ever see one of the old Superman TV shows on one of the cable channels or something? Back when I was a kid, man, that was great. It looked like he was really flying. Nowadays we look at it and say, oh, that's goofy, that's worthless, that doesn't look at all like the guy's flying. So it's all a matter of perspective, and you'll find that in this movie. But it's got a message that's right on target. So watch that movie, and in your chat this week, I want you to comment on that movie. I want you to tell me I liked it, or if you didn't, tell me that too. Tell me the basic message you got out of it. And I think you'll find it was time well spent. I don't remember how long it is. I think it's less than an hour. Or it's relatively short by movie standards. And you'll get a good message out of it. So watch that Gospel Blimp and then see where that goes, where that takes you. Because that's going to be sort of the prelude or the introduction. It's going to be sort of the foundational philosophy that we're going to build on, from here all the rest of the way out. So with this class, we are leaving behind all of this material where we talk about the how to get there, how to organize yourself there, how to survive once you're there, how to learn interaction with the people that you're working with, all of those kind of things. And we're going to start talking now about actual methodologies and how we use them. Now, as I said, I'm not going to give you the latest, greatest plan by John Doe there, and go buy his book on Amazon, and with this you've got it all set. We're not going to do that. So I won't mention any specific plan by any specific person. I will mention styles of evangelism that have kind of gone through the church in waves. In other words, one will be popular for a while and everybody's got to do the latest, greatest thing there. Then that kind of fades and then they do something else, and it kind of goes back and forth with this ebb and flow. And so what I want to do is try to cover all of those things and give you the overview. And so as they come and go, and as you grow and mature in your ministry and in your life, and you see something else new coming down the pike, you can smile a little bit and say, we'll see what's worthwhile in this one, and then use it that way. So as we go forward, and as you see new things coming down the road, I hope to give you a few tools to put in that toolbox we've been talking about, and that you can use those tools to evaluate what you see. And as the Bible says, study all things, keep that which is good. And so that's what you do. You look at these programs, you say, well, this was done up in Chicago, but we're not Chicago. And so it's probably not going to work here. But within that plan, there probably are a few good things that you can take and you can apply and you can adapt. So the introductory message I want to leave you is don't buy hook, line, and sinker any program that comes down the pike. It will not work for you the way it worked for them. That never happens. But every one of those programs has good things in it, or it would not have worked there. And so that's why you need to take the program. You need to study it carefully. You need to evaluate it. You need to ask what it is in this program that talks to their culture that won't talk to mine. And what is it in this program that may be somewhat universal and will probably work here as is, or at least if I adapt it in some way. And that's how we need to make use of these materials that are out there that are being developed continually on a new basis, and some of the older traditional ones that are kind of still floating around out there a little bit. So the things I want to begin with are the types of manners in which we reach people with the gospel. And we have two big overriding paradigms that we'll start with. And one we would call the direct method, and the other we'll call the indirect method. And both of those have been used from the very beginning. So if somebody says, oh, this is the way they did it in the Bible, didn't do it any way, well, we can look around the Bible. The Bible has an awful lot of stuff in it and find different ways of doing things. So the direct method, what is that? Well, the name kind of says it all. It's where you directly speak to and present the gospel to this individual. So you're going to speak to this individual. You're going to take that message to him personally, and in that manner, you're going to share the gospel. Now, direct evangelism includes things like, we used to go door to door a lot. Don't do that much anymore. We used to go out in public places and find people kind of sitting around doing nothing and talk to them. Well, don't do that a whole lot anymore either, that type of thing. But one way that I think we still do evangelize, and one way that I think is still pretty effective, and one way that I think we all should be using is what I would call friendship evangelism. Now, that's within this direct evangelism modality. Now, I'm going to be talking about a whole bunch of other things later on, but this direct evangelism almost has to work based upon knowing that person. That's why the door-to-door stuff generally doesn't work too well. You've probably all had Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons or somebody show up at your door. Were you excited to see them? Were you really ready to listen to their message? Probably not. They probably interrupted you when you were doing something. You're not too happy to see them. You want to get rid of them. They win a few people, but they tend to win people that are kind of the outcast of society. They tend to win people that are often, very lonely and have no one to talk to, and so they're desperate for anyone, and so they'll let even a Jehovah's Witness or a Mormon come in. But we don't win the majority of people, and we don't win the average and the normal person within our society. So we do that based on friendship. So what do you do in life? I don't know, golf, hunt, fish, whatever. Whatever you have as a hobby, whatever you have as a pastime, whatever you have that you enjoy, you'll probably find that that brings you in contact with other people. We are social animals, so to speak, social beings. And so since we're social beings, we look for connections with other people. The reason we get married, the reason we have a family, that's our social nature. But then beyond that, we all extend it. Women have a tendency to form groups of other women that they are friends with, even after they're married. Guys do the same. I got to have a guy's night out, so to speak. Going to go to the ball game, whatever. Go to the deer camp. So when we're doing that, we tend to reach people that we have a connection with. We share commonalities and things, interests, hobbies, generally our own stage of life. You don't too often find the old grandpas winning a lot of young teenagers to the Lord. Now, it can happen, but usually with grandchildren, not with just any teenager that happens to be out there. Why? Because the old grandpa's life is now different. He has very little in common with this teenager. He's not struggling with classes. He's not worried about how to get the right girl or the right guy or whatever for a date, that type of thing. That's just no longer part of his life. And so he can't share those things. And if we can't share those common things, we don't share the less common. And the less common here is our religious and our spiritual nature. That's not the first thing we usually start talking about. It might be right after you get baptized or something, you're all excited and all that. But generally speaking, once we settle down to life, that's not the first thing we bring up in a conversation. You'll bump into Walmart and say, hey, how was church this Sunday? Or how's your religious life going? You might say, hey, how's the weather? Or something like that. Or, what are you going to do this week? Or whatever. So we talk about those mundane things. And then from there, the door may open. Now, indirect evangelism, there's a lot of ways we can go about it. But what it has to be is you make a connection with somebody on something, your hobby, your work, your family issues, something in life that you're dealing with. And you connect with that person on that level. And then once you've connected with them on that level, that opens a door that you can go through and you can begin to share these other things, these less common, these more personal things, which is our spiritual life and our religious values, our Christian beliefs in this case. Now, the indirect method is the exact opposite. We don't know who it is, it's just we throw it out there. They'll use the parable of the sower, and he goes out and he throws the seed out there, and wherever it falls, and some of it grows and some of it doesn't. This would be things like television, radio spots, I suppose, things like that, flyers that we might put out, pamphlets or brochures, inserts in the church bulletin that they encourage you to take home and just give to somebody, things like that. In other words, there's no personal connection. There's usually written or visual or auditory information presented. Now, I just saw on the internet yesterday, as I was looking on Facebook, a friend of mine, and he's talking, and what did it say? I think it was something like 62 million people heard the gospel yesterday. I'm recording this video the day after Christmas. And so this guy had done a Christmas video that he put up, and he got it on some TV station or network or something like that, satellite channel, I think it was. And so he said 60-some million people heard the gospel. Well, did 62 million people hear the gospel? Probably not. What they refer to there is there was a potential audience of 62 million people. How many actually heard? 10? 100? 1,000? Maybe 1 million? We have no way of knowing, really, until we get some feedback. And so the indirect method is we simply throw it out there. We have no connection with the person. We don't know who they are. We don't know what they are. We don't know where they are in life. We just know they're out there. And we throw it and hope it finds its mark. So those are the two comparisons, direct and indirect. And from there, we'll start talking about the specifics of how to work in both of those areas in our next class.